All right. Recording. Okay. Welcome. Destiny Movie Night Hangout, War Dogs. I'm your host, Mike, with my co-host, Marlen. Hey, Marlen. And our guest, Talamon. Hey, Talamon.
Hey.
Hello, guys.
So, for everyone tuning in, the movie War Dogs came out earlier this year. I'm just going to jump right into a real cool point in the movie that I saw, and I just want to bring attention to because it really invokes some self-reflection within myself. Um, and yeah, obviously, spoilers alert. So, spoiler alert. I found it was only like a small point, but it really encompassed the end of the movie, was why everything fell apart and didn't work out so well. And what I mean by fall apart was, the story didn't have such a happy ending, if you will, where everyone lives happily ever after as like the main characters. They're all doing well. They made their money by being smart, working in good ways. Using the structures that were here to, set up a life for themselves that was, well, good. Because earlier on in the movie, you see, okay, they're just like playing with things here and realize like, hey, we could actually benefit from getting involved in this industry, which happened to be weapons for the military. And what was missed along the way, and it was a crucial point, was regard for those who you are working with. And there was a couple examples, really. Well, it was primarily one person. It was the European guy who was responsible for boxing the cargo, shall we say, the bullets, the ammunition. And what happened was the main, one of the main characters, one of the guys who's responsible for the business of moving this cargo to the U.S. military, basically disregarded the role of this European in the process as him just getting a small cut on this big deal they're making, and in such basically judged him as less than himself, where he's superior because he's making all this more money, and in the process totally basically just fucked him over and thought, oh no, what could come of this, like didn't even regard possible consequence for it. And ultimately, in the end, his lack of regard for, his fellow mate, essentially, who he's working with, it ultimately sewered the whole enterprise in which they set up. And in the end, they go to jail. And they go to jail not because of while their activity was, pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable, not acceptable. But there's a lot of activity that happens like that all the time. And things would have been totally fine if the relationships they had fostered were nourished and developed in the sense of giving attention to it and not neglecting it. So I found that to be, just like a very cool point in the story as take care of your relationships or you're fucked.
Or in essence, not only even relationships, but also anything where we want to take shortcuts as well, where we believe that, this point is meaningless, it won't come biting back to my ass or something like that. And that's the exact point that makes everything crumble. So I very much agree on that situation with this person that they disregarded to pay, and he's eventually the one that blows up the whole story about these guys packaging this Chinese equipment to the US military. Also, another point that is kind of similar is the contract that these two partners, or best friends apparently, tried to establish, and how it is all based on this notion of trust, because you're my best mate. To me, that was like the most meaningful thing, how this friendship relationship in business many times in reality ends up fucking it all up, because there's no separation between keeping the business, the trust in contracts and leaving everything clear to the T, and everything gets convoluted into a sort of blind trust, that when it comes to money, the whole story really shows us how even the best relationship, the best businesses can fall if greed is like the main attraction and disregarding everyone involved in making something work. That was for me like the point. What about you, Tala?
Yes, and also for me, it was interesting to realize that this is based on an actual true story. Like there was this US Congress or Senate hearing when one guy was talking about this young guy, and then they showed his picture. And then I realized that this is indeed a real story, and this is exactly what happened. Like they didn't pay like 100 something thousand for the Bulgarians. Meanwhile, they got millions of dollars, but they tried to disregard this little cut from the actual worker guys who reboxed the ammo. So that's why they got screwed up. So it was really like it's a pity, because it was like a simple task, and they just got blinded by their own greed.
Totally.
And it was horrible.
It's super interesting because like as Marlen mentions the point about the contract, and even between the two business partners, how it wasn't really accounted for the possibility of greed getting in the way. Like the one guy took steps just to make it legit, in a way of like, oh, we should create a contract, make this legit. But even in doing that, how he took regard of that contract paper, it wasn't really considering like, okay, we're making this legit and I'm placing my trust in here, and part of the reason I'm doing it is because shit could happen between us. But he didn't really, put that document in a safe place or anything. Like he might as well have left the contract on his buddy's desk, for all intents and purposes. Which to me, is a very real thing to take into account when getting into business with anyone is the point of the contract, but also having the contract in a safe place, for both parties, or, maybe it's in a third party holding point where, it's made known to all parties that here's the contract. And so it's in a way substantiated that it's out there. Not one party can just go and take it and manipulate it, kind of thing. Because and that point also, if that point was in check with the Bulgarian, it's like, they made an arrangement, and it was kind of like, well, we're making an arrangement, but we're keeping it low key. And in keeping it low key, it was, easily again manipulated, exploited, and thinking like, oh, what's the worst can come from this? Not considering, again, everyone involved in all the possible outflows. So just, a point that really stemmed through for me is just structuring a balance within the various dynamics at play for everyone's best benefit.
And also how many times it gets convoluted, in the sense that they had like this relationship from when they were very young, and so the whole business was built only on that experience that they have had years ago when they were in high school. They reunite, and whenever they talk about money, and the guy Ephraim tells him, I'm looking for a partner, but I don't trust people, but I trust you, you're my buddy. So they're the only connection, the only link is just this friendship that was actually fucked because they were caught in another situation, like smoking weed or whatever, which had separated them before. So it's like the story repeats. So there was this precedent to the relationship where they kind of forget about it, start over again, moved by money now. And this guy, David, that joins the business, in essence, from my perspective, kind of didn't do that self-check of, wait a minute, what was my relationship with this guy in the first place? How come I just trust him because of the good times? And that's how in the mind we work, right? Whenever we remember a relationship, we tend to remember all the good stuff, all the positive, fluffy, nice. Oh, it was so nice. But we suppress, we deny, we neglect, we hide or keep secret everything that was actually consequential, that was actually problematic. So when I saw that relationship just building up as out of nowhere, almost just like meeting each other again, it's like, of course, that was also very rushed. From my perspective, David could have done some kind of investigation of what am I actually getting myself into with this guy. So the trust is built out of this friendship notion that then is simply like glued by money, and it ends up being the most destructive one, to the point where, well, you know that scene when he punches him in the elevator, it's like, that's a fuck you in the face, literally. And you see how this kind of relationships built upon energy, not real trust, knowing each other, being considerate, supporting each other. No, each one was just, you know, following each other's desires and dreams of more money and greed, and it's like all that goes up went down.
Yeah,
like that.
It opens up the point for me also in really looking at the character David there, how he just basically time looped through various degrees of consequence as a result of like abdicating responsibility in his different relationships that he had. Like if you take, for instance, his girlfriend slash wife slash new family, where, you know, time after time he was caught within his own consequence, which is essentially as a result of his own dishonesty, where he wasn't being forthright with his partner, which, you know, had serious consequence. Like there wasn't a stability there, and because there being an instability there, you know, that kind of seeps over into him in this other world of his business that he's operating, because he's not taking the time to make things stable here, because having stability here will assist with establishing stability here. And that's possibly why, you know, he made the mistake of not being so grounded in his approach with the contract and whatnot. And also even, you know, being partly responsible for the payments being overlooked by his business partner, because they were in the business together. And, you know, part of the role of being partners is that you're going to be like a cross-reference to make sure everything is good, because neither of you wants to just like be like, no, it's all you. If things fuck up, then it's just fucked, but I'm not going to take responsibility for making sure things aren't fucked. And in a way, because they kind of got separated in that, because he was separated within himself and his own life, you know, nothing ultimately was that great in the end. Like he was able to repair his life so it looks with his partner, but, you know, not before putting her through extreme unfortunate situations, and also considering the child within all of that, where, you know, she's in this environment of intense strain as a result of basically her dad not having his shit together, you know, not taking the time to just like structure a balance. And for me, that those points just really reflected back into myself, like my life, and taking the time to structure the various points at play in my immediate environment, in my immediate world, like what I'm participating within, whether it be, you know, just a small amount of time into this, a bit of time into that, but basically like accounting for all the spokes on my wheel. That's, you know, my immediate environment.
Yeah, I can totally agree. Like when he had this pressure at home, when he was like caught lying with his girlfriend or wife, basically they agreed not to lie, and then he repeated it because he knew that she would be like really uncool what industry he was working in.
Yeah.
And then I guess with with that pressure, he tried to like balance it. Like, okay, fuck it, let's just make a lot of money quickly, and then she will be like happy, and then we will be happy. And maybe he just got this tunnel vision in the mind, and he didn't see that it's going to fall apart soon. Probably
Totally.
because he was afraid from her, and then from the Bulgarians, and then the I don't know, the guy who was like the really terrorist guy who appeared, and then also that guy, he was like in the background. I guess he was also not so cool in a way. So he was completely like in reactions from one part to another. So he was not directive at all.
I mean, that point of having to keep the lie in place, and I'm selling bed sheets to the military, and I mean, all the stress that he had to put on himself just because of that lie. I mean, who knows if he could have actually come clean and explained, like, okay, this is going to be a temporary business or whatever, or simply take it as what it is. Yes, a business to make money. It is a work business, yes, and maybe the wife would have reacted, etc. But in the end, if she knew that she would benefit from it to have that life, who knows? Maybe she could have kind of understood that temporary job. But here we come to this interesting topic, which is making money out of something that is a war industry. So that's what I would like to get your perspectives on, Mike.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point because, well, you know, obviously there's a market there for it, and that's why these guys got into it, because basically they were just looking at the market. You know, like the one guy, Ephraim, was very more business minded, and he came from a business background. His father was a businessman. And so he got into the world of business, basically, you know, trading, like commercial trading, basically middlemaning products initially. So yeah, he was just looking from like that structured point of like, well, what exists already in this world, you know, not trying to reinvent the wheel, and looking to leverage a profit off of that, because like, how can I provide a better service than's being provided? And from just like that perspective, without getting into like the morality of whether, you know, certain industries are right or wrong, so to speak, he did a very good job in the sense that they could not accept their offer because the way they presented it. And they did do some good legwork. I mean, they connected with the guy who was like on the watch list, who was very resourceful, who orchestrated the deal. And then they realized like, okay, there's a technical issue, which is really a minor issue, which shows kind of the ludicrousness of the bureaucracy in saying that no, we can't accept the trade if it came from them, because our relationship with them is that we don't like them, and so we're not even going to accept, even if it's the same good you're giving us, we'll take it if it comes from, you know, these guys, but not if it comes from these guys, because we don't like these guys. So then I thought that was kind of funny, because it's like, well, we'll just change the packaging, the information, so then all is cool on the information highway, so to speak. And you know, this world is very much an information highway. If we look at just the transportation movements of goods, currency, it's all about information moving around and who we are within it. So from that point, these guys were pretty cool in how they put together a business as a service that was being sought after, whether they provided the service or not. So that point existed there, and they just saw how they could create the best way for it, and thus it was a win-win situation for both parties involved, which is really cool. Then I guess you could say you could get into the point of, well, you know, if you only have so much time in this world, what are you going to support? Are you going to support industries that you do not like per se, or are you going to put your, you know, attention, energy into something that you do like? And my perspective on that is that, yeah, it would be nice to be like, I'm only going to put energy into something that I really, really like per se. But you know, the reality is we have a whole structure of how things are set up in this world. And to simply say I'm not participating in all these things I don't like is very impractical in a lot of ways. Like, to say, for instance, I don't like the way the current money system exists because it's based on debt and essentially the whole world's in debt. So I'm just not going to participate with money. Well, guess what? You've made yourself a bum. You know, you have no potential ability to really move around much because you're in total conflict with the whole system now based on that stance and wanting to fight against it. So my perspective on everything is that it's to work within industry, basically. Like, I think the easiest way to substantiate all different industries, like let's take the military for instance, is by having people within the military that are cool, are grounded in common sense principles. Because if we look at the military in this world, you know, it's especially, let's say, the USA's, it's a huge industry. There's huge potential for great stuff to come out of it. I mean, they've showcased their ability to work with, you know, new technologies and stuff like that. What if, you know, they were the primary labor force for developing the infrastructure throughout the world where infrastructure is not very well developed? I mean, that would be pretty amazing, you know, and that's just a small shift. And, you know, perhaps it just needs the right players or like the right teammates involved within that industry to, you know, pivot, move it along in that direction, the right leadership, so to speak. Yeah. That's my bit.
Hala, any comment on that same question? What's your take on that?
Yes. But I reacted when Mike told this, that to find a way when I am within the system, but not of the system, like not be lost in it or find purpose from itself, but like seeing the bigger picture, like okay, there is this military industry, and then there is this law enforcement and police force, and what is the good balance? And as you, Mike, mentioned, that like someone could orchestrate or just give the direction to use the military for infrastructure rebuilding or enhancements. And basically the guys are all day there at the base, so they could probably enjoy to face some new challenges, and then maybe some new leadership could suggest that or put it on the table. And then so yeah, I definitely see that potential, like be in the system and then be part of it, and not get owned by the past or by the current flow of the system.
Yeah,
same with the money, same with the many cultural things, especially with the military. I think because the militarization, of course, it's my passion also. Like I would like to see it right now, today, in this moment. But if everyone would put down the weapons, it's all of this paranoia that all the others would attack me and then occupy my resources and place. So somehow have to find this like a real practical way to do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's super interesting because, you know, and like what a big focal point in this movie was, in a lot of different levels or ways, was contract, you know?
Yeah.
Like contract law, essentially. You could say like at a personal level and at an interpersonal level and at, you know, a universal level. Because it's like the ways in which we've agreed to do business with one another, you know, from like your life partner to your business partner to, you know, outside global business. And, you know, like the war industry operates like on these premises, you know, like there's certain diplomatic relations within each country where things are structured in a certain way where it's basically, you know, justified and rationalized as like the letter of the law, that, you know, these are our war game activities, this is our industry, you know, we support business within this industry, and it's based on conflict, where conflict is like incorporated within the basic framework of like military law, so to speak. And it's just, you know, it's like this closed system, this permaculture we've created, and we're just like, you know, that's the rules that happen within the way we've structured things. So like what Tala is saying about, you know, every industry and the structures that exist, it kind of brings to mind the analogy for me of like building houses. And, you know, if you go into some area and there's like older houses that were built a long time ago, it's terrible. It's so unnecessary to demolish the whole structure and then to want to build a new structure in replace of it. Because, well, there's been studies that have shown that that's not, you know, very supportive for the environment, because you're disrupting the environment in a more adverse type of way than to actually work with the environment, work with the structure that's in place, and complement it by making the repairs and the upgrades that are necessary. And I see that's kind of like the same thing with, you know, the different major pillars of industry we have that make up the world system, whether it be, you know, banking, military, law, politics, you know, people, us, like human relations, school, you know, recreation, leisure. It's basically like we have all these structures, and it's just a matter of like how each of us within this world participate within them and bring our voice, our common sense as our participation to be, you know, leaders, titans of industry in a way.
What I was looking at is more like if we had the opportunity to have or be part of that same business.
Okay.
I mean, some of us have had jobs that are not necessarily industries that we would support, yet we make money out of it in order to survive and do what we do, which is more defining what we are building, for example, with Desteni. So how I wanted to kind of frame it is, would you guys go into this industry? What would you do with that money if you were in that same position? How I saw it is that if I had those skills, those connections, I could go into it and at the same time use that money not in that kind of lifestyle. I wouldn't particularly be following that, but more into developing a bunch of projects that are yet to be brought forth in Desteni, for example. Something that, you know, is taking money from one of these main industries, but then channeling it to supporting people to real change. Because it's not like we're going to change the military in one day. I mean, it sounds great, but this is more about this individual change and this individual realization of, oh my God, we have to do something, and that starts one by one. So what we need is becoming massive, becoming more able to be found everywhere, for example, in the media, promoting this type of new way of living, a new way of thinking, new way of acting in this world. And that's what I would do personally. And this is definitely one of those points where people would usually say, well, it's immoral to be part of that industry. And I have been there myself, you know. But at the same time, when considering the whole aspect of we're all responsible for this current system, it's not that we can just cut off the war industry, as Tala was saying. There's no demilitarization that's going to happen tomorrow. So if we can be part of this industry or any other industry, yet use that money in a way that helps bring forth these changes, why not, right? What do you guys say?
Tala, you go first.
Okay. For me, it's I had to look at this approach before, because as I started to walk Desteni and then started to kind of liberate my mind, one day I realized that morality itself is also kind of belief and self-limitation. And I was like looking for okay, what if I let go morality? What if I become this selfish monster? Like I can get anything I want because I don't have anything to block my direction. So what I will find myself to anchor with alignment with life, so to speak. And then I realized that is my principle, like equality and oneness, and then like give as I would like to receive. So I do not need morality. So in this sense, I would not be afraid. But personally, somehow I had some contracting job with some sort of military background. Like I made inventory with weapon systems and ammo one day. And then I realized that I do not want to be part of the military industry directly. But still, it's really good money, I guess. And probably it's tempting, like, okay, one would not buy a Lambo, for instance, but to like make education and foundations. So there is this fine line, I guess, because funding military groups in Afghanistan with Berettas and ammo, I probably wouldn't do personally because for me it's like not with my principle of life. And then okay, people would say like, okay, if I do not arm these rebels, then the other group would kill them. So then I would be the responsible not arming them. So yeah, it's war is so fucked up, I think, that one starts to justify one side or another. It's already too many compromise for me. So that's why I like, yeah, I wouldn't want to work in war industry personally, but I work in the entertainment industry. I'm not sure it's that much different in a way, like war of the minds. So
See, it's just a mask.
yeah,
In essence, you know, it's actually one of the most pervasive ones, the more sugar-coated ones. We won't say the name, of course, but you know, it's one of those things that we get it from very early age and stuff like that. Not mentioning names, but it's part of what's here at the same time. And the very, as Mike was saying, the way that money functions, all of it. We want to escape from seeing ourselves as responsible for it all. But once that we are responsible for it all, then the least thing that one could do is, if you happen to have these kind of jobs or get these offers in certain positions, you know, act based on kind of principles and do things properly. That would be my advice if anyone comes to me and says, hey, I want to be part of the military. It's like, well, it's your decision. And at the same time, consider what are you going to invest back in terms of the money that you're going to be making. And it would be up to them. It would be up to me, you know, what we create or do with that money. What about you, Mike?
Yes, I agree, Marlen. Because the way I see it is, you can't, that's kind of like the whole irony of the whole process that each of us walk in this lifetime, is seeing that we're not separate from anything here. And it's, to be in this world, but not of this world. So whether it's entertainment industry or war industry or law industry or whatever, is like we're a part of all these industries, because it's like, we are the industry, like it's all us. So for myself personally, like I would have, I actually considered this just recently. I was like, wow, maybe I should go into the military, because it's not an area where I would, normally in my pre-programmed life would ever go to, because like, that's with the way I've constructed my character, that's not who I am or whatever. But then I was looking at like, well, what is cool about military? And what is really cool I see about military is structure, like how things are very specifically structured and laid out and detailed and very specific and organized. And there's good points of discipline and, law and order, so to speak. And the process within ourself is really establishing the law and order within our own mind as we balance our word and world relationships. So yeah, it came to me in reflection just recently.